And I'm like, "Oh, right, that's the divine asking me." My human self is scared, right? It's 4 in the morning. There's all these homeless people. So I get dressed, I take the $10, I go outside, and he said, "See that diner? There's a young man sitting on the steps. Can you go over to him and bring him the $10 and tell him it's from me?" So I go over and I said, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "Yes, ma'am." And I said, "I'm giving you $10 from Jesus." He starts crying. He said, "I have been sitting here and I have been praying to Jesus all night that I really want to have breakfast. I'm so hungry and now I can have breakfast. Thank you so much, ma'am." And I'm like, "You're welcome." And then I just walked back to the hotel, the empty lobby in the hotel. And I went back up to my room and I'm like, "Can I go back to bed now?" And I did, but it was that young man's face, I'll never forget it, ever.
Welcome to Pebbles of Light, where we highlight the everyday people who bring hope, comfort, and light to others. I'm your host, Anne Maxson, sharing meaningful stories to help you find light in your journey. If the messages shared resonate with you, please follow, share, or support the podcast through Patreon to help keep the mic on and spread the light even farther. Before we begin today's episode, I want to share a brief note of gratitude. One of the gifts of this podcast is the opportunity to sit with people whose beliefs, language, and experiences may differ from my own. At Pebbles of Light, we believe meaningful connection often happens when we listen with openness and curiosity. While Robin and I may use different spiritual language at times, I'm grateful for the shared values that emerged in this conversation: compassion, humility, and the search for peace in everyday life. Enjoy. Today, my guest is Robin H. Clare, who's the author of Harmony, The Frequency of True Success. Robin helps guide people toward living with authenticity, clarity, and compassion. Today, we'll reflect on how the smallest daily choices can ground us, reveal our worth, and invite more grace into our lives. Robin, thank you so much for joining us today, and please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you so much, Anne. I'm delighted to be here. So again, my name is Robin Clare. I'm the spiritual author, and what I do is I write books that are given to me by the ascended masters. I have an idea of what it is that they want me to write, and then I move forward. And I'm also a nonprofit leader of a small nonprofit here in Connecticut. And yeah, I've just lived a very full life. I'm a mom, daughter, wife, friend,
All
all of the
those,
above,
yeah. Thank you
for
for being
sure.
here. I
Yeah.
want to start out with something that we talked about before when we met a couple weeks ago. You talked about this idea of how pain is inevitable, suffering is an option, or in some cases a choice, right? And surrender is required and grace must be allowed. I think I'd heard about pain and suffering being kind of together, but the surrender and the grace was new to me. Would you mind kind of explaining that a little bit more?
Yes. So this was, I call it Sophia's healing path. And this was described to me from Sophia, who many think of as the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit in Christianity, or in Judaism, she's the Shekhinah. Basically, she says, well, I want people to think of me as grace.
Hmm.
When you need or want grace in your life, that's her that's coming to help you. And I say her because she also has shared with me that she is the divine feminine. I learned that her name is Sophia or Grace. She is Grace, and she came to me and asked me to write a book about recovery. Well, that was difficult for me, Anne, because I was in addiction. And I'm like, how am I supposed to write a book about recovery in addiction? I was in addiction from obsessive compulsive food disorder and bulimia. And so I said, well, how can I say no, right, to this divine entity that's asking me to write a book? So I wrote it. And then at the end, I wrote, I'm sorry. I hope this book works for you. It didn't work for me. Have a nice life. And I'm like, okay, I can't publish that. So I put it on a shelf until I was came into recovery, and I came into recovery because I truly hit rock bottom. I had a bulimic episode where I was bleeding from my nose and my head was pounding. I knew that I was a couple of bulimic episodes away from potentially killing myself. And so
Yeah.
that got me to stop. And then eventually I picked up the book again and I rewrote it from a place of recovery. And then I got to the end and I had a real ending. The book is called Feast and Famine: Healing Addiction with Grace. And I listened to Carolyn Mace book about healing yourself. And in the book, I was inspired to understand that long term recovery requires coherence of mind, body, spirit, and emotion. You have to be on top of all those four elements of who we are as a integrated system, because you could have things come up and your mind could, trick you or distract you. Your body is going to have things that go wrong with it. Your spirit is going to challenge you about, who you are in the world. So, and then of course your emotions, they're the biggest culprit of all to knock you off your path of healing, right? So the way that I did that is I went out and I interviewed all these people that were in long-term recovery to find out what was their secret, and that was their secret, that they had made a commitment to all four of those, um, to stay well and healthy. So now to answer your question.
Yeah.
So Sophia's healing path that she shared with me is that pain is inevitable, suffering is an option, surrender is required, and grace must be allowed. And it was funny, I said to her, pain is inevitable, suffering is an option. The Buddha said that. And she said, well, you don't think I said that to the Buddha too? She
Yeah.
is kind of in the hierarchy higher than the
Yeah.
Buddha, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that was kind of cool, right? So, but she said, but let's talk about it in relation to addiction. Because she said, and this was the most profound thing that is, I think, about this book, is that there's only one major form of addiction on this planet, and that's to suffering. And then we pick our poison as our secondary addiction, whether that's alcohol, cigarettes, food, porn, bad relationships, a bad job, whatever, Netflix, right? I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying Netflix, but
Distraction, right? Distraction.
distraction. That's right. So those are secondary addictions. But Sophia was very clear that our main addiction is to suffering. So what I'm saying is that in order to come into recovery, true long-lasting recovery, you have to heal your suffering. And what does heal your suffering means is that you have to be willing to look at the trauma patterns that created your suffering. And it's not easy to live that type of examined life, but that's the key. When I looked at my moments of deep trauma around my life, my suffering was really all about humiliation and shame. What got me to a place, the grace that I heard that got me is that no one can humiliate or shame me unless I give them the title of judge. If I don't allow them to judge me, to be a judge and judge me, they're just giving me their opinion, and I can say, thank you, however, wherever I am at the moment and how I want to address it. But once I understood that, then I was healed from the fear of humiliation and shame. And then I didn't have to partake in overeating and certainly not vomiting. So that was my recovery journey. And it's been 9 years now. So pain is inevitable. It is, right? Even if we were to say we're mind, body, spirit, and emotion, we're going to find some place to be in pain. And then we're not alone on this planet. We've got our parents, our partners, our siblings, the world, our politicians. Everyone's like
Yeah.
creating this opportunities for us to suffer. But the interesting thing is that suffering is an option. And I didn't know that. I thought pain and suffering were kind of the same thing, right? And we say it that way, right? "Oh, that poor person, they have so much pain and suffering." It's not the same thing. Suffering is a way of reacting to the pain. And so then you realize you see some people who are in a lot of pain, but they're joyful, right? They have found an inner peace or they're connected to their higher power and they're not suffering. And then you have those people you're like, why is that person so suffering? There's like, doesn't look like there's anything wrong. Now, it's just because you can't see it doesn't mean that nothing is wrong. But your perception of them is, why are they suffering? So it can go either way. But Sophia said pain is inevitable and suffering is an option. And that was huge for me when I was learning this. I didn't know that as I shared. And so I had to learn that.
Yeah, that made me think of a Bible verse in John 16 verse 33, where it says, "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world." The pain, the tribulation is going to happen, but
Going to
being able to
happen.
have peace, that is, you might have peace in me, but it's a choice.
It's a choice, right? And once you really understand that, then what happens is you learn to surrender. And we talk about the word surrender. So surrender is required. And so what does that really mean? I will say what it doesn't mean. It's not wishful thinking. I wish I could stop drinking. That's not surrender. Surrender is I am done. And the way you know you're really done, I think, and this is what I know in my life, you feel it physically. It's like your whole body becomes like, I am done. Like, and then you're done. And it's at that moment that you are in true surrender that grace must be allowed. And what does that mean? So grace is like, oh yes, this person's a surrender. Our turn. They're gonna see all the wonderful things that we want them to have in order to heal. But I said grace must be allowed, right? And so what is must be allowed? Why did she say that? She said that because we don't always think we deserve it. And so even if you're in surrender, you may say to yourself, I really was a piece of crap before. I wasn't very nice, right? I kind of wrecked my relationships. Oh, I hurt people or I hurt myself. And yeah, I'm not deserving of that grace stuff. And that's why she's saying grace must be allowed because grace is available to everyone 24/7. It's all around us. And even today, I was singing happy birthday to my best friend, and a cardinal landed on my car. And I said, oh, I think your father's here. Because I don't know your audience, cardinals, when they arrive, it means that a loved one is trying to get your attention. That's grace to me that a cardinal would land on my car as I'm sitting in the driveway singing happy birthday to my best friend.
Yeah.
That's grace, right? It doesn't have to come in some, miracle, but that is a miracle, right? It's a small miracle. So all the small miracles. It also could come in the form of someone listening to us talking today and saying, wow, I think I can do that. So it comes in listening to a podcast. It comes into someone recommending a good therapist or someone saying, hey, come to church with me this Sunday, right? Let's heal. Let's let's enjoy life. And so that's the grace. Let's do something fun. It's always there. It's there 24/7. I'm not kidding. And we just have blinders on, and our blinders is usually our own trauma and our own shame. And then the secondary substances that we use to feel better from the suffering, and those blind us to grace. Because the cleaner you are and the more sober you are, it's like the world opens up. It's actually brighter outside, right? It's actually clearer and people are nicer. And you're like, what? That wasn't,
Yeah.
last year.
It allows you to see those moments a little bit
It's
more,
see
right?
the moments, and I promise you, everybody, they're around all the time. And because of the work that I do, and I love what I call synchronicity. So someone might call it coincidence. I call it synchronicity. That's coincidence fueled by spirit.
Mhm.
And those are Those are so amazing. Those are so fun, like a cardinal landing on my car.
So every time I see blue herons, I think of my grandmother
Mm.
because I grew up in northern Minnesota. There was always blue herons flying around near the lake.
Yeah.
It is not a coincidence the number of times that I have seen a blue heron during a time when I've felt unsettled or
Yes.
something, just a little reminder
Yeah.
of that eternal connection.
And the blue heron, I was walking on the beach up in Massachusetts. I was trying to think of a cover for my second book, The Divine Keys. I'm walking on the beach, Anne, and in front of me, I see this bird. I'm sorry your folks can't see me, but it's flying like this towards me. And I'm thinking, what? I'm in Massachusetts. What is it? And it landed next to me and walked with me on the beach. And it was a blue heron. And I'm like, "I don't know why you're walking with me," but I did get a picture of it. I don't know if you could see that.
Okay.
And that's on the co and I knew that was the cover of the Divine Keys, but I wanted to share with you, Anne, just something really that I just wanted to read to you. The heron is a beautiful creature exhibiting grace and noble stature. In Egypt, the heron is honored as the creator of light. In China, the heron represents strength, purity, patience, and long life. In Africa, the heron is thought to communicate with the gods. Native Americans revere the heron as a symbol of wisdom. So I just wanted to share with you, since you love the heron too, that when it comes to you, the message is to truly connect with nature outside, and then your
Yeah.
own divine nature. Like, put your divine nature out in nature. And so I'm just sharing that with you. That's what I learned
Yeah.
about the heron because I studied it after it landed next to me, walked with me.
That's amazing. Thank you for
You're
that.
welcome.
Just helps me just even think about my grandma even more and some attributes she had that are similar to some of the things
Mhm.
that are related to that. I love that thought. Thinking back kind of to the conversation about grace and how it can be hard to offer for ourselves. I think that even I've seen that even in regards to receiving either a compliment or an insult from others. So, just as an example, I used to play tennis pretty often. And I would have people I loved and cared about tell me, like, you've got a really great, cross court forehand. And I would be like, oh, yeah, whatever. But I had a stranger tell me that. And I was like, huh, look at me. I've got a great cross court forehand. I feel like that gets more into that idea of like, we don't allow ourselves grace. We don't allow ourselves, either ourselves or those we care about, sometimes to give us a compliment and really internalize it. Does that
Yeah,
make sense? And
it does.
how can you flip a switch there?
Yeah, accepting compliments is really hard for everybody. But I have come to believe that everyone that I encounter, for whatever reason, now some people are in my life for a season, a reason, a season, or a lifetime, but everyone is reflecting back to me my own divine nature. And they are there giving me some piece of information that I need. And so if they are giving me a compliment, well, thank you.
Yeah.
When you think of them as representing the divine to you, then you're it's easier to accept the compliment. And one of the things that also do is I practice the pause. So if someone says something to me that I don't like, I don't say anything. It's very uncomfortable for them. But when I practice the pause and I breathe, I allow myself to breathe. I allow myself to think about how I want to respond. A wonderful response is, wow, it sounds like you're really upset. Is there something I can do to help? And most of the time there is. Most of the time they'll be like, yes, yes, I am really upset about that. Could you help me? Right? Like they are just asking for help into whatever they're suffering about. And that's part of the harmony, right? The pause gives you a chance to breathe and to figure out how you want to react. Because most of the time when we react badly, it's because we didn't pause.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we understand, believe me, I understand that. If you choose to pause, other people may think you're wussing out, right? In your response, but that's not what I'm doing at all. What I'm doing is taking the time to let it to diffuse it and then to have a conversation, and it's been so much more impactful, and, sometimes we don't even know when we yell at somebody. Yeah, so it happens, right? We are divine beings having a human being experience. And one of the questions that I had asked on my own journey is, do we ever get to 100% divine? And they said, not as long as you're in your human body, because otherwise, what are we doing here? If we are not learning to live as a divine human, right? Let's combine them, right? A divine human. We need those human experiences. We need those encounters with other human beings at different levels of development to challenge us and to see how we're going to react and grow, and how are we going to share the divine light with everyone that we meet. When you're like Mother Teresa, Buddha, right? Whomever, right? Whatever, who have reached that state of enlightenment, they don't need to be here anymore, right? Because they're at 100% divine. And then I think it's harder for them to stay. I think they do their work and then they move on.
Let's also talk a little bit about that idea of how we can kind of tune into that divine part of ourselves when the world is so noisy. Last week, I did this thing because I've got two kids, two different schools, and I'm like, how many emails do I get from the school each week? 318 pages
My
in one
goodness.
week of just noise in some ways, right? Some of it is important information, but there's also a lot of other information mixed in that I don't necessarily need as just kind of noise in my life. We've got all sorts of things asking our attention, whether that's emails or the news cycle or social media or, you know, all the things we have going on. How can we filter out that noise while we strive to figure out our own personal alignment?
Yeah, because we think we have to react to it all. I think that that's the issue, right? We have to react to what's going on in the news. We have to react to the emails. We have to be the person who is always empathetic and always on top of things and always, 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 right? But what we're missing is the time that we spend with our own self. And when we do that, when we spend that time with our own self in reflection, in prayer, in meditation, in walks in nature, then we are able to see and hear things in the world and just say, that's important, that's not. Not to say that we should be ignorant about what's going on, and not that we shouldn't be activists, but we should also know what's important to us. And what is really important is, to me, is reacting in my divine nature. There's a wonderful book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and it talks about the difference between your zone of brilliance and your zone of genius. And your zone of brilliance is what you're good at in your everyday life. Your zone of genius is what the divine would love for you to accomplish in this lifetime. It's why you're here. And it doesn't have to be spiritual. It could be mathematics. It could be anything. The best mom you can be, right? The best teacher. But in between the zone of brilliance and the zone of genius is our self-limiting beliefs that tell us we're not good enough. They could be what our parents told us. They could be what is going on in the world. We hear things that are out in the world and we think they're ours. And so it stops us from doing our zone of genius. So one day I was in New York with my daughter walking around. I said, I think my zone of genius is that I'm able to explain difficult spiritual concepts to people in a way that they understand it. And she said, yeah, that sounds good, Mom, but that I don't think is your zone of genius. I think your zone of genius is the fact that when you look at someone and smile at them, they stop to talk to you. And she goes, I don't know if you've noticed, but in New York City, when you've done that, 5 strangers have stopped to talk to you to say, hi, how are you, ma'am? And I'm like, I'm great. How are you? And they're like, good. Have a good day. And she goes, people don't do that in New York, right? And so she said, "Is there something you did before you came here?" I did. I said to Yeshua, I said, "Come inside of me and use my eyes to say hello to people you wanna say hello to." And so I had embodied this energy, and I was going to be his eyes, and that's what was happening all weekend. I was just like, "Hi," and they'd be like, "Hi," and then they'd stop and talk to me. She goes, "I've never seen that, Mom," and I said, "Well, I don't know if that was my genius or Yeshua's, but it was a way for me to deliver the divine message in a beautiful way that
Yeah.
was easy and simple." Like, I'm like, "Use me, let me be your eyes here." And let people look into my eyes and then feel worthy, and that's what happened.
I used to have a process I would do when I would go into circumstances, like whether I'm going to the grocery store or whatever, and I would have a prayer in my heart of, Heavenly Father, help me see this person as thou sees them, and help me to say to them what thou would have me say to them.
I love it.
Um, and sometimes I would be prompted to say somewhat awkward things. Sometimes there was an older woman, and I felt that I should tell her that she was beautiful, which she was in her own way, right? And she just kind of got teary eyed a little bit. And one time I was walking near the river here in Boise, and with a prayer in my heart of, oh, I'm struggling with this and this and this, and I started to feel a lot of inspiration of things that I could change. And because I was out on this kind of little peninsula, and I was walking back to the regular part of the shoreline, and there was a person standing there, and I had the thought pop into my head of, can I trust you? And I thought, I want to say yes, but what are you going to ask me to do right now? And so, but at the same time, I felt gratitude for all of the inspiration I had just received. So, of course, I would say, yes, you can trust me. And the thought came, this person standing at the foot of the river needs a hug. And I thought, okay, I'm not really a hug person, but all right. And so as I started walking and getting closer, I saw that this person was Hispanic, and I served a Spanish speaking mission. I speak pretty good Spanish. I was like, oh, that's why it's me. That's why I have to go talk to this person, because I speak Spanish. So I walk over and I say, ¿hablas español? And they say, no. And I said, wait, okay, do you speak English? And they kind of, no. And I said, I know this sounds weird, but I had the feeling that you need a hug. Can I give you a hug? And they just nodded, and I gave them a hug. And then they were crying, and people always ask, they're like, well, what's the end of the story? Why did they need a hug? And I don't know, because for me, it was such a kind of awkward exchange at the moment, and I didn't necessarily need to know why, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just said, I hope you have a great day, and then I was on my way. But those have been very interesting, stretching,
Yes,
but also
so
important
stretching.
moments.
So it's when you're being asked to be a vehicle of grace, right? Like, we think it's gonna be the hawk or something, the sunrise, but why is it not? It so clearly can be us. I have an interesting one too. I was in Mount Shasta in California, which is a very spiritual place, very interesting place. But it's also a place where people who are hitchhiking and potentially homeless. And about 4 in the morning, I got woken up by Yeshua, and he said, "I need you to go outside and take $10 with you." And I'm like, "I'm not doing that. I'm scared." He's like, "I'm asking you to do it. Why would you be scared?" And I'm like, "Oh, right. That's the divine asking me." My human self is scared, right? It's 4 in the morning. There's all these homeless people. So I get dressed, I take the $10, I go outside, and he said, "See that diner? There's a young man sitting on the steps. Can you go over to him and bring him the $10 and tell him it's from me?" So I go over and I said, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "Yes, ma'am." And I said, "I'm giving you $10 from Jesus." And he starts crying. He said, "I have been sitting here. I am so hungry." and I have been praying to Jesus all night that I really want to have breakfast. He goes, I'm so hungry and now I can have breakfast. Thank you so much, ma'am. And I'm like, you're welcome. And then I just walked back to the hotel, the empty lobby in the hotel. And I went back up to my room and I'm like, can I go back to bed now? And
Yeah.
I did. It was that young man's face. I'll never forget it ever.
Yeah.
The look on his face when I said, this is from Jesus for you. And he just I think forever he will be a believer now.
Yeah. That's true.
That prayers can be answered.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think even more so that prayers can be answered, but that he's seen, known, and loved by God. Right?
Yes, beautiful. Right, right. And I think that this idea of being a vessel of grace is if all of your listeners took the time to think about when something like that happened where they thought, "Oh, that's weird." I'm saying that's weird because that's our first reaction. That's weird. Why did that person say that to me? Or what? What was that? Right? That was a weird coincidence, right? It's never a weird coincidence. It's grace, and it must be allowed, and it's in our face all the time, 24/7. If we're lucky, and like we were, we can become vehicles of grace.
Yeah. Exactly. I read this quote earlier today, and it just kind of reminded me of some of the things that we've talked about. So I just wanted to read it. It's from Dieter F. Uchtdorf. And he said, during the winter, days can feel heavy and gray. As a regular part of their work, before flights, pilots do outside checks of their aircraft. During cold and rainy days, this is not their favorite part of the job. But one of my favorite experiences as a pilot on a day like that came after taking off and climbing through dark clouds, when suddenly the aircraft climbed into the clear, brilliant, and beautiful sunlight, leaving behind dark clouds, rain, and slush. That instant contrast taught me that when we focus our eyes on heaven, we can emerge into light, even during the seemingly darkest of days. However thick the clouds, the sun is always there, waiting to shine on us as we rise toward heaven. If you feel weighed down and troubled, please don't lose heart. Keep moving forward and upward with faith, prayer, and trust in the Lord. His light is always there to lead and comfort us.
That's beautiful. Reminds me of, I share that I love to walk on the beach, but especially at sunrise. And even if it's raining or cloudy or awful or windy, the distance, the sun is always rising. And the cloud formation on a not nice day around the sun rising in the horizon on the beach is like some of the most beautiful sunrises I have ever seen. So that your story reminded me of that because it's rainy or foggy or cold, that would never stop me from walking on the beach at sunrise because it's going to be magnificent.
Yeah, it adds more texture to life to have
Mhm.
opposition
Mhm.
and things that
Mhm.
we have to overcome, right?
Yeah.
Robin, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate the
And
things that you've
thank you for
shared.
having me. And for me too, like I haven't been this open in quite a while about my connections, so it was kinda nice to speak about them. And it was lovely because in the past, I would have spoken them from a place of fear, but I didn't feel fearful today, which is really nice. So thank you for that.
Great. You're welcome. In this episode, we explored what it means to live as a divine human, to move through a noisy world with intention, humility, and compassion. Robin's stories reminded us that sometimes the smallest acts carry the greatest light. This episode's pebble is to choose one intentional act this week, an encouraging message, a quiet prayer, a moment of listening, and offer it freely without needing to know the outcome. Thank you for tuning in. My hope is that something helped you feel seen, encouraged, or inspired to bring light to someone else. If a name or moment stood out, don't let it pass. Reach out, express gratitude, or take that next step. You can connect with me anytime on socials at Pebbles of Light or at annemaxson.com. If this episode was meaningful for you, please follow the show, rate or review, and share it with someone who might need a lift today. And if you want to go a step farther, you can support the show on Patreon. See you next time.